why have you not been giving any money to basketball? Or why has Rick Barnes not been more involved with getting money for basketball? What the H is going on there? Have you taken a look at Miami? Do you know much about Miami and the run that they've been on? Because Miami is not a basketball school, in case you haven't heard. But Miami has been on this incredible run, and they'll play UConn in the Final Four. Well, why will they play UConn in the Final Four? Well, I'm going to tell you, because it's NIL. They've got this really shady cat down there named Ruiz who decided to bring in a bunch of money, and they are playing the game in basketball, and basketball is easier to make an impact. Look at Miami. The Hurricanes' top players have been affected by NIL money. Nigel Pack and Norshad Amier, they transferred from Kansas State and Arkansas State. So you can go one of two ways. You can get the Bronny Jameses of the world and pay him a bunch of money by the high school route, or you can get guys, and we're seeing, I think John Calipari do some of this. You can get guys that have a little bit more experience, but that aren't happy with their current school. That's what Miami did. They also had to talk Isaiah Wong into staying thanks to some cash. So why in the world does Tennessee not have an impact player, a scorer that is on their basketball team that we can point to like Nico and say, NIL did that? Did anybody go to Kennedy Chandler and say, hey, here's a bunch of cash to stay? Because he's making about $4.9 million. I looked it up over 4 years. That's not an insurmountable amount of money. I can tell you that Jacob Warren, when he decided to come back, he weighed it against the league minimum in the NFL, which was about $750K. So is he making $750K as a student athlete at Tennessee? No, he's not. But he's making at least comparable money to live good, have a good time in college, and you could have gotten, I think, Kennedy Chandler somewhere in that realm. I saw Nico on a Walmart commercial, for goodness sake, on Instagram. I don't know if you saw that. That's Walmart. That's not Bob's Used Cars on Kingston Pike. That's Walmart. So if you can do that in football, what the H? Why can't you do that in basketball? And is it Rick Barnes' fault? Is it Spire or some collective group's fault because they want to focus on football? What's going on there? One impact player would have changed this team completely.
Well, theoretically, yes, but as I've told you in the past, as I've talked about in the past, and I think you and I both agree on this, Rick Barnes is not the best at meshing an impact player in with the team that he's got. He's never been that type of coach. He keeps his system kind of going the way it is. He runs that flex offense. And because remember, Julian Phillips was supposed to be that impact player. We were talking of Julian Phillips as a lesser Kevin Durant as Rick Barnes knew Kevin Durant. Does anybody think he's anywhere close to Kevin Durant after seeing him this past year? Julian Phillips.
Okay, well then the answer to what the H is, he apparently can't deal with the new day and age of college basketball, which I believe, and I've said before, is going to go through a renaissance because of transfers and NIL players. I think more guys are going to stick. But then if he can't handle it, then that's another strike against him and a reason to maybe look elsewhere.
So Dave, you're coming to my side that maybe Danny White could do better.
I don't doubt that he could do better. I also think he could do worse.
So I think that Rick Barnes I think where Tennessee can rely on NIL, given the style of coaching Rick Barnes does, you hit the nail on the head. The NIL for Tennessee should be used to keep players there for another year or two. Because I think the deadliest type of teams that Rick Barnes coaches are the ones that have played together for 2 or 3 years, that have developed under his system, that kind of developed with each other. We've seen that before. That Tennessee team that was number 1 and won 30 games, there was not one 4-star recruit in the rotation on that team. Not one. And Grant Williams was a 3-star. Admiral Schofield was a 3-star. Jordan Bone, Kyle Alexander. I can go down the list. There were no 4-star or 5-stars. The thing was they had played together for 2 to 3 years at that point, and Rick Barnes develops players so incredibly well. So what I think Tennessee should be doing with NIL is not using it to get a splash transfer. I think they should be using it to keep this exact same team that Rick Barnes coached this year together. Just make sure everybody comes back. Even though Tyreek Key is gone, I don't, again, no disrespect, Tyreek Key, but he's not going to be that big of a loss. I think that you get everybody back next year. I think just the experience of playing together and working and developing in Rick Barnes' system gives Tennessee an edge over so many teams, because this is the state of college basketball right now. You're right. This is where NIL is going to deliver college basketball renaissance. I think the Final Four this weekend is garbage. I'm just going to say it straight up. I think it's garbage. It is a default Final Four because the top teams are not as good as the top teams used to be. Experience is outweighing talent right now because nobody's coaching at the Blue Bloods that get the one and dones and the NBA prospects anymore. And that's the problem.
Well, I think that you're going to see the playing field get more level in college basketball. And I don't hate that. I don't really have a problem with that. But I get back to specifically why Tennessee basketball doesn't have that impact player, whether it's Kennedy Chandler or whether it's a high school kid or a transfer like Miami went that route. Why is the question I have. And if you don't have an answer for me, Rick Barnes, and I'm doing the postseason review, we got a little bit of a problem. Okay. If you don't have a reason, I don't like those guys. I don't believe players should be paid, whatever. If you don't have a pretty solid reason, I got a problem in your postseason review.
Oh, no, I think Rick Barnes has come out and embraced NIL. Now, he hasn't embraced it the way Tennessee football has embraced it. Rick Barnes did openly complain about NIL being used as a recruiting tool, which technically I know they're not supposed to do. We all know they're doing it. And we all know Tennessee football is barely hiding the fact that they're using it as a recruiting tool at this point.
Okay, but I don't even like that. I don't even like the fact that he would say, and please hit that thumbs up button, the like button. We appreciate it. I don't even like the fact that he would say that he doesn't like NIL. I didn't like, if I'm a Clemson fan, I don't like that.
Well, he didn't say he didn't like NIL. He said he doesn't like it used as a recruiting tool.
Well, then don't say that.
No, I mean, I'm with you.
Never, ever say that. I don't care if you believe it.
Because, and the NCAA technically says you're not supposed to use it as a recruiting tool. How are you going to stop it? How are you going to stop using NIL to recruit athletes? That's happening all over, and we know it's happening everywhere. And so I agree. I don't think Barnes backs off NIL to get impact players. I don't. I mean, there's still a few weeks in recruiting. He didn't nail Julian Phillips until after the season last year. So we don't know what's going to happen over the next few weeks in recruiting. I think that for Rick Barnes, though, I don't think it's that he doesn't go for the impact player. I think the impact player is not a good strategy for Rick Barnes, given his style of coaching.
Well, then he needs to change his strategy, or they need to change coaches, because that's where the sport's going. This would be synonymous with Josh Heupel coming out and saying, I've had enough of this throwing the ball around the park. It is time for us to go to the triple option. Sorry, that day didn't already happen.
Are there really? But is there a go-to impact player on any of these teams in the Final Four this year?
I think Miami has 3.
But that's the thing, that if there's 3, then there's not really one impact player. Tennessee, I think, does have a few impact players that if they stay, look, Santiago Vescovi could be an impact player. I think Julian Phillips could develop into an impact player. And if Zakai Ziegler comes back healthy, he's an impact player.
Well, I mean, if you look at that Miami lineup and those top 3 cats that they had that were affected by NIL, and you put Tennessee and Miami's rosters together, those 3 guys are starting. I don't know who the 2 Vols are starting. Maybe Vescovi and a big guy.
Probably Josiah because of the defense.
Or Josiah, yeah. I mean, obviously we're talking about life without Ziegler, but yeah, I mean, I maybe you have 3 mini impact players. However you want to shake it, I just don't understand how NIL hasn't had a huge impact on basketball, because you just need 1, 2, or 3 guys. If you want to go 3 guys at the semi-impact players like you're talking about, or 1 Kevin Durant top, whatever the case may be, why did that not happen in the past year?
Yeah, I think that there were players that we thought were going to be impact players that didn't work out. Again, we thought Julian Phillips and Josiah Jordan-James and Santiago Vescovi would all be impact players. Josiah couldn't stay healthy. Santi was really erratic shooting, and Julian Phillips did not look like a 5-star. The other part of this that we're missing is that, look, I have to call him out. Uros Plavsic has not developed for a 7-footer. He's in his 4th year in the program. You would expect a 7-footer to look like you'd expect him to look like an NBA draft pick by this point, developing 4 years in. I think that's where you could really criticize it. I think by next year, Jonas Adu is going to be the starter at center. It's going to be Jonas Adu, Olivier Kamwa. But I do think there is some development we're seeing. Let's not forget, Jemai Mashak became an impact player later down the stretch. I think that there were just some issues that I have a huge problem with Rick Barnes' coaching strategy. His reliance on the mid-range, his X's and O's drive me insane. I'm not so sure his roster assembly is as much of an issue. I'm not sure that these.
Again, the gun issue is a big issue, and I'm not overlooking it. But could Rick Barnes get a Brandon Miller top guy just athletically? I'm not talking about character or any of that. Could he get a Brandon Miller top?
Oh yeah. Rick Barnes has been getting those for ever since he's been at his early days at Texas. He's been getting those. His big issue is Rick Barnes is not good at getting a Brandon Miller and then plugging them in with the rest of a team, of a cohesive team.
Well, no, I'm asking you moving forward with NIL now.
Oh, I think he can. I think they'll be able to. Now, I will say this. I think a lot of Tennessee boosters are investing more in football, but I will say basketball is a smarter investment for 2 reasons. One, as you said, you just need one player, but 2, and more importantly, although it's easier to tell how good a college football player is going to be in the NFL than it is college basketball in the NBA, it's much easier to project a high school basketball player to college than a high school football player to college.